Thank you for joining me in Hoda's Career Info. Our guest today is TikToker and founder of Impressive Interviewing, Lili Foggle. I'm your host, Hoda Kilani, career and academic coach. Coaching is all about storytelling, helping you to envision and tell your story your way. Hoda's Career Info is about sharing stories of inspiring career people from across the globe. I hope their stories motivate you to envision your career story, discover your road to success, or recast your career path. Let's go.
When you tell your story in response to whatever they're asking, you're doing it in a way that is really focused on the message you want your story to deliver. I'm not a big fan of writing out stories, but I am a big fan of practicing your stories. Authenticity is really going to matter because that's how you build trust. Learning interview skills can profoundly transform someone's career and their life. Interview skills have the power to profoundly change your life.
Thank you for joining Hoda's Career Info, your career program where guests from across the globe share career tips and personal stories to help you successfully navigate your career. Watch, listen, and learn. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and follow me, Hoda Kilani, on social media for more career info. More importantly, make sure you have that very important career conversation with a career professional. Our guest, Lili Foggle, is the founder of Impressive Interviewing and a leading educator on interview preparation and communication skills. She is the winner of the Momentum Awards 2025 Top Specialty Coach from The Modern Coach and holds interview coaching certifications from Career Thought Leaders and the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. Lili has taught hundreds of her one-on-one clients as well as many of her 70,000 TikTok followers how to deliver effective and confident answers in job interviews. Her proven data-driven communication techniques help candidates stand out in a competitive field and secure the offer. Lili has conducted interview skills training for the U.S. Navy's Transition Assistance Program, top coders 1.5 million IT professionals, and Fulbright postdoctoral researchers competing for coveted academic positions. Through the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches, Lili provides interview skills training and mentoring to other career coaches. Lili is a passionate advocate for the power of interview skills to transform careers and lives. She believes that with training and practice, anyone can learn to give authentic interview answers that gets the job. Stay with me as Lili shares profoundly valuable interview tips and so much more. Thank you so much, Lili Foggle, for joining me today on Hoda's Career Info. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
The first question I always ask Lili of everybody is, what is the term that best describes your work and how would you define it?
I consider myself a communication skills instructor, but I am a certified interview coach. I have 3 different certifications in that area, but I really think of it as more communication skills.
How would you define communication skills?
Sure. Coaching it's an important part of what I do. And that's the discovery part, right? That's the let's figure out where what you offer is what they're looking for. And let's have conversations. And I'm going to ask you coaching questions. But then at some point, once we've figured out the messages that you want to land in the interview, you have to be able to articulate it. And you want to articulate it in a way that is confident, in a way that is authentic and concisely. Right? A lot of people struggle with rambling. And in that, in that articulation, that's where a lot of people have trouble. They understand what they need to say in the interview. They know why they're a good fit for that company, what value they offer to that role, but they don't have the skills to communicate that with confidence, with authenticity, and concisely. So I teach those skills. And it's a set of skills. It's a set of skills like driving, right? And so when people work with me, we work for usually about 5 hours. And I teach the skills to be able to give the authentic, confident answers that communicate value and fit in an interview and get the offer.
That's perfect. And part of what you do also is get them to kind of tell you their story so you can help them with building these skills.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things I love about your podcast is I know you're all about the stories and telling the stories. And that's in that way, you and I are very similar. I'm about helping other people tell their stories. And it's not just telling your stories like how to answer tell me about yourself, or how to do a star scenario, or whatever format you're using for success stories. There's a whole bunch of different ones. But it's really about understanding the hiring manager or the recruiter or the interviewer's perspective, so that when you tell your story in response to whatever they're asking, you're doing it in a way that is really focused on the message you want your story to deliver, and not putting a bunch of extraneous or things that don't support that message, but really keeping it focused and authentic. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they prepare their stories for an interview, and very few people, I think, understand how to prepare properly for an interview, which is why they have so much anxiety, because no one tells them. They're not teaching this in college. They're not teaching this in most schools. So I think that the biggest mistake people make is they write it out. They write out their stories, because most of us are much more, particularly if we've been through college or any kind of higher education, we're more comfortable with our writing skills than we are with our speaking skills, right? But when you get down to it, interviewing is a speaking skill. And if you're just writing out your answers, it's not going to serve you when it comes time to tell your story, for a couple of reasons. First of all, when you write out your answers, we write differently than we speak. If I were to come in here and everything that came out of my mouth was something I had written down first and I'm reciting those lines, it's not going to sound like authentic speech. Similarly, if you were to transcribe everything I'm saying, it probably wouldn't be very good writing. But we write differently than we speak. So right away, you're setting yourself up for, I've got this perfect story on paper, but that doesn't help me when I actually have to speak it. The second reason why I don't like that, and why that's not the most effective way to prepare a story, is because when you write things down, it's very easy to start looking for the perfect language. I'm going to say this perfectly. I'm going to write it and rewrite it till I have it perfect. And then what are you going to do? Are you going to try to memorize it and recite it? That's not going to sound very authentic. Are you going to try to read it without them noticing you're reading it? They will know you're reading it. So I'm not a big fan of writing out stories, but I am a big fan of practicing your stories, of understanding what's the purpose of this narrative? Who am I talking to? And what do I want their takeaway to be? And then giving my clients a framework. Like, when you tell the story, here are the things you want to hit in the story. And then just encourage them to practice talking naturally. And for a lot of them, it's really uncomfortable because, again, we don't have, unless you're a presenter or a podcast host or a podcast guest, you don't have a lot of experience speaking and speaking authentically, right? We're very used to, if I'm going to have kind of a high stakes communication, I'm going to write everything out first. But it's much more authentic in an interview if you can just tell your story, not being scripted, right? And authenticity is really important in an interview, especially now in the age where AI is really taking over the hiring process. And resumes, unfortunately, are because AI flooded, and hiring managers and recruiters don't even know what they can trust in the resume and what's real and what's AI generated. That when you come into the interview, if you get to that point, and we could talk about how hard it is to get to that point right now in this market, but if you get to the point where you're actually in a live interview, not a asynchronous interview, but actually you are live on Zoom or whatever platform, authenticity is really going to matter, because that's how you build trust. When somebody is reciting lines or reciting a script that they wrote out perfectly before the interview, that's going to land like inauthentic. And there's something about that that just is a little off putting and doesn't really inspire trust or believability.
I love this very much, Lili. And with these insights in mind, can you tell us your story and perhaps embed in it a message that you'd like to share by being on this program?
Yeah. So my message is really simple. And that is that I believe that learning the communication skills that you need in an interview, learning interview skills can profoundly transform someone's career and their life. I believe that because it did it for me. I also believe that just about everybody can learn to interview successfully. You know, interviews are really, they're high stakes event. They're important and they're people's livelihood. And so I take it really seriously and I understand how powerful these skills can be. So here's my story. I had my very first high stakes interview, like dream job kind of interview when I was 24. And at that time, so, you know, I'm a little bit, I've been working for a long time, right? I'm a little bit on the other end of the spectrum of age from people who are graduating. And so, you know, if everyone's career is a story, mine's probably a trilogy. So now we're in book one of the trilogy. Okay. So in book one, I wanted to be an actress. I had trained in a conservatory. I had had quite a bit of experience in various regional theaters. And that was my goal. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And I had just gotten out of 2 years of training in a conservatory. I had just moved to New York City and I was pounding the pavement. You know, back in those days, we didn't have computers. You couldn't go online to look for the casting calls. You had to go buy a copy of Backstage magazine and look in the back to see where the audition was. You couldn't send in a self tape like you can now. You had to go to the audition, wait in line and audition. So I was doing that, but I was networking really hard. And I managed to network my way to an audition for a Broadway director, a pretty famous Broadway director, who was casting an upcoming Broadway show. And I was not union. I had no agent, but I had networked my way that somebody got me into this audition. And I was so excited. So I don't know if you're familiar with how these auditions go, but they're really kind of in four parts, right? There was at that time, maybe it's different now. I don't know. I left that field. But at that time, you had to sing 16 bars. You had to read what's called sides. They would send you the script ahead of time, or maybe you just be presented with it at the audition and you had to act. Maybe you had to do a couple of combinations of choreography, and then you'd have an interview with the director. So I worked so hard preparing. I rehearsed my sides. I rehearsed my 16 bars. I went to 2 dance classes a day because I'm not really a dancer, but I wanted to be able to nail the choreography. And in terms of the interview, I didn't do any prep. And I didn't do any prep because the advice that I was given, the common advice at the time, if you were going into an interview, was just be yourself. And I thought, I'm charming. I've got a sense of humor. I could just be myself. So I did so much work on the music, the singing, and the singing, the dancing, and the acting. And I did zero prep for the interview. Made it through the 16 bars, made it through the choreography, made it through the sides. And now I'm face to face, one-on-one with this Broadway director. And he looks at my resume. Now, at that time, you had to submit a headshot, and on the back of your headshot was everything you had ever performed in. And one of the things I listed was an off Broadway show I did when I was 13 years old. Now, remember, I'm 24. Okay. So he looks at my resume and he points out this little thing, this off Broadway show I did when I was 13. He said, "Oh, I've never heard of this show. What is this show?" And I said, "Oh, that." And here I think I'm turning on the charm. That was just some little thing. This woman wrote this whole thing herself. She paid for it to be put on. It really wasn't very good. And he looked me dead in the eye and he went, "Really? My mother wrote that show."
Oh.
So, by the way, if anyone listening doesn't understand how bad of an answer that was, you never say, this is why you never say anything negative about anyone you've ever worked with in an interview. So obviously I did not get the role. That director never called me for another role. Like, that was just the worst bomb ever. Okay. So fast forward about a year and a half, I've decided to give up on acting. It wasn't really working for me. And I have been working in nonprofit. And I've been working on in nonprofit kind of part-time. And I decided, you know what, that's what I'm going to do full time. And this is maybe, the second book of the trilogy. I'm gonna work for an organization that I really believe in. And again, networked. I was a good networker. I networked my way. Somebody knew somebody who knew somebody who got me into a civil rights organization that I really wanted to work for. And I knew that I needed to prepare for this interview. I got the interview. So at that time, again, there was no TikTok, there was no Facebook, there was no internet. I could not look online. There was certainly no chat GPT. I went to the library and I looked up everything I could find about interviews. And I called on my landline every friend I had. Is like, what do you know about interviewing? I was at that age, now I'm about 26, where some of my friends have been through pretty rigorous interview processes, and I got lucky. I had one guy, it was actually someone I used to date that I was no longer dating, but I called him because I knew he had just been interviewing. And he said, wow, I just finished the course that Yale puts us through. He was graduating from law school when we interviewed for like the big firms in New York and LA. So I'm happy to tell you what I learned. And he told me, kind of took me through it. And I went, oh, wow, this is not just be yourself. This is work. This is research. This is practice. And so I did everything he told me, and I got the job. And after I got the job, one of the people who had interviewed me said to me afterwards, you were really the dark horse. You were not as qualified as some of the other candidates, but man, you nailed that interview. We had never seen anyone give an interview like that. So this is why I say that I believe that interview skills have the power to completely and profoundly transform careers and lives, because it did it for me. I then went on to have a career in nonprofit before, the next book in the trilogy comes, where I'm raising my kids. And then the epilogue is, me becoming an interview coach. And it really started because after I had spent 20 years raising my girls, which, by the way, is a job, was a lot of work, maybe more work than when I was working. My husband was like, so what do you think is the next chapter? Like, what are you going to do when you're an empty nester? And I started thinking, and over the years, that woman who had interviewed me, who said, you nailed it, we had never had anyone interview like that, she had started a side hustle as a career coach. And every so often over the years, she would call me and say, Lili, I've got this client. They are a rock star on paper. Like, they've got everything, but they keep bombing the interview. Would you mind sharing some of your interview secrets? And I would work with them for an hour or two and they'd get the job. So I knew there was something there. I knew that there was a power in this skill and that it had value. And it was something people needed. And that's when I started. That was 9 years ago. I went out and there were only 2 certifications at the time for interview coaches. I got both of them. I built a do-it-yourself website on Wix. I started following, just everywhere I could get my hands on information from hiring managers, from recruiters. What are they looking for? Going to webinars, going to conferences, reading all the journals, all the trade, following things online. And I started with a $40 a month Google ad and charged almost nothing for the first year until I wanted to make sure that every single client that came to me felt like they had gotten value. And I found, and it wasn't a surprise to me, that my clients were getting the job because nobody knew how to prepare for an interview properly. And interview skills was not something that other people were teaching, and they weren't learning it in college. So I found there was a real need for what I was teaching. So that's how I got into it. And the message is interview skills have the power to profoundly change your life.
I appreciated you sharing the trilogy because I saw also many messages embedded. And this led you, of course, to becoming an interview coach. There are not many interview coaches, as far as I know. So your title is definitely unique and you've got 2 certifications.
Actually,
so I'd like
3.
3 now. Okay, cool. Very cool. Do you want to share the certifications so people learn about what's available out there?
I've gotten 3. Only 2 of them do I stay active in the organization. So the 2 that I'm active with, are the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches, and the other one is Career Thought Leaders. And I'm certified by both of those. One of the first certifications I got, which I'm no longer active with, so I guess it would be considered expired, was Career Directors International, which at the time, they and the Professional Association of Resume Writers and the Career Coaches were the only interview coaching certifications I could find at that time.
So can you tell the audience what type of service does an interview coach provide? You already a little bit hinted about the value of preparing for an interview, but how do you help your client?
Sure. Mostly, I work with clients one-on-one over Zoom, right? I have a couple of different packages. I started with anyone that comes to me, I'm going to teach them these communication skills so that they never need me again. I really saw myself like a driving instructor, right? Like once you learn to drive, you don't need a driving instructor anymore. And so I created a curriculum over 3 sessions, each session being about 90 minutes. So maybe 4.5 hours total, where I could teach the communication skills, where we could go through the messaging. Interviews are about 3 things. They're about value, fit, and likability. And it took me about 3 sessions to be able to cover all of those. But something happened. And what happened was I started getting a lot of calls from people saying, I've got an interview tomorrow. Can you help me? So my curriculum was meant to be done over like 3 weeks. It was time to practice the skills and build on the skills. It was a very well thought out curriculum. But if you call me 2 days before your interview, I can't do that whole curriculum. So I had to create a second curriculum for those people. It's not as comprehensive. It's what I call my emergency session, also 90 minutes. So most of my clients come to me for the 3-session interview preparation package. We do it over 2 or 3 weeks. A good portion of clients do the emergency session. And then I have clients that come to me for other things. I have clients that come to me to help them prepare for podcasts. I have clients that come to me to help them prepare for a stock pitch. I once had a client who was a political candidate who wanted me to help them prep for an editorial board interview. So those are fun. Those are a little bit different. I also do a lot of training for career coaches and resume writers who want to offer interview skills training to their clients. So I do that through the Professional Association of Resume Writers and Career Coaches. I've done a number of trainings for them, and I've spoken at their last 2 conferences. I do trainings in groups. I've done trainings for the U.S. Navy as part of their transition assistance program. I've probably trained a couple of 100 soldiers and officers that are separating from service. I was the resident interview coach for Top Coders, 1.5 million coders and software developers for about 3 years. Did a number of online trainings for them. I've done trainings for Fulbright for their Fulbrighters who are leaving Fulbright and applying for academic positions, tenured academic positions. And then there's my TikTok, right? I've got more than 70,000 followers who use my coaching in my videos to help them get the job. So that's kind of the span of how I do what I do.
That's very impressive. I didn't know that it went beyond job interview preparation. So that was very cool to learn. Since you mentioned the TikTok channel, I'll jump to that question. And so you have a TikTok channel. We'll just repeat the name of that, Your Interview Coach. Just if they look you up, I know I looked that up and I found you right away, where you frequently discuss valuable interviewing tools and interviewing questions. But of course, there's more to it. If anyone who checks out the TikTok, you'll learn a lot more. So what would you say, just from the TikTok channel, is the number one concern in interviewing based on your TikTok views?
So I think the biggest problem is that right now, people are not getting interviews. It's really hard to get an interview right now. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why that's true. And a lot of it has to do with AI. And it's frustrating for the candidates, but it's also frustrating for the employers, right? So the explosion of AI and online applications has meant that when an employer posts something, they get flooded, often sometimes with thousands of applications really quickly. I was talking to one recruiter about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and she said she posted what she calls an average internship. This is not a highly competitive internship. This is just an average, kind of thing that somebody who's coming out of college would apply for. Not a big deal, not, highly coveted. She said in 24 hours, she got close to 2,000 applications. Out of those 2,000 applications, very few were actually qualified. I think she identified 257 that were qualified, that met the qualifications. She sent invitations for a one-way interview. That's these asynchronous interviews, by the way, this is a train that's coming, and it's I think, going to be standard in recruiting very, very soon. That the first thing you will do, in addition to uploading your resume and answering the questions in an application, is you will have to do a one-way video interview. And the reason for that is because companies no longer trust what's in the application, the resume. There are companies like AI Apply and things like that, where you upload your resume, you upload your information, and they apply you to hundreds of jobs automatically, and you don't even know that they're doing it. So companies really can't trust the information that they're getting, which is why recruiters now are curating their lists. And one of the things they're doing to curate their lists is they're looking at LinkedIn activity to verify whether or not somebody actually has the skills that they have, which is why if you've got listeners who are trying to apply for jobs, they're applying for jobs and they're not getting interviews, the biggest thing they can do to help them get through that initial process to actually land the interview, other than making sure that their resume is targeted to the job description and making sure that their resume is what we call ATS friendly. It's not a template. It doesn't have text boxes. But the other big thing is to be active on LinkedIn. Engage, connect, comment, like, post. That engagement is what recruiters are using to verify that somebody is a real candidate, they're not, a made up, they're not going to ghost, they're really there, they're really looking for work, and they really have the skills that they claim to have. So that's a big one, is not getting interviews. The other one is it's just taking them so long. What I'm seeing in my comments is a real kind of hopelessness from people who have applied to literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jobs. They're doing what we in the career industry, I'm sure you're familiar with this term, called spray and pray, right? I'm going to take my one resume, I'm going to spray it to 500, and I'm going to pray that somebody gives me an interview. And that just doesn't work. And you could do it for a year and it's still not going to work. What's a much better approach is to target 5 companies, make those connections on LinkedIn. You should be connecting with them. Everyone should be connecting with everyone on LinkedIn. That way, if you apply to a company, let's say I apply to company B, right? Then I can go to my LinkedIn and I can see, who do I know that knows somebody at company B? How am I going to do that? I'm going to look at company B. I'm going to look at the employees of company B, which you could do on LinkedIn. And I'm going to look for a second connection, meaning I'm connected to somebody who's connected to somebody there. And I'm going to use that network to get my resume seen, to get eyes on my resume. Right? So that's number one. Number two is when they get interviews, the process is taking a really long time and they're getting really discouraged by how long it takes. So there's some data around this. It is not, it's not just anecdotal that it's taking a long time. LinkedIn does a workforce confidence survey. And the one they did, I think it's the most recent, from December 24 to March 25, shows that on average, it's 5 to 6 months from the time you start applying to the time you get a job. And that's crazy. It's never been like that, right? So people are getting, particularly when they remember a couple of years ago, this is not the experience of their friends who graduated 3 years ago, 4 years. Of course, COVID is a whole other thing. But they weren't expecting that it would take 5 to 6 months, right? This isn't COVID. Why is it taking so long? But it's taking that long because in many ways, the hiring process is going through a big change. AI is really motoring that change. And I would say to those listeners that are in that situation, and what I say to my TikTok followers, please don't give up. Just try something else. Don't keep doing the same thing you're doing, right? Try really targeting. And the other thing I'll tell you is, because companies get flooded so fast with resumes because of all these automatic applications coming from AI and easy apply, it's really important to be one of the first to get that application in the first 24 to 48 hours. And that means you have to have everything, including your resume, ready to go. But you have to be first, because frankly, if they're getting 2,000 applications, I have a client that got a job. They said they had 3,000 applications in 1 week. Anyone who applied after that, they weren't even looked at. So it's important to be fast. You have to be ready to apply quickly.
This is all very valuable information. And if I were to ask you to summarize it in three short points for people to go back and listen in detail to you, what you just shared, what would you say to that?
I would say if you are looking for a job right now and you are feeling frustrated because you are not getting interviews, number one, target. Target the companies you'd like to work for. Don't wait for job postings. Target them. Follow the people who work there, follow the company, and start making connections. Number two, target your resume to the kind of role that you might become open to that company. Target your interview prep. Think about your success stories. Target. Number three, got to network, and you've got to be fast. Be ready that when that position opens at that company, you are ready to go. You've got your network in place because you've already connected with those people. You've got your resume ready, and you are ready to get your application in within the first 48 hours.
Thank you so much for taking this on, Lili.
Yeah.
Now, I've landed the interview. So exciting after all these months of waiting. What do you say to those who believe that they can prepare for an interview on their own?
Yeah, absolutely. You could prepare for an interview on your own. You don't need to have an interview coach, but I would say be careful. Be very careful because two things. Number one, interviewing is a speaking skill. If you're a teenager in the United States and you want to get your driver's license, right? You know that you have to get behind the wheel of a car with an instructor and practice driving before your road test. You know that you can't watch TikToks about how to drive, listen to a podcast about how to drive, and ask your parents for tips about how to drive and walk into that road test and get your license. You need to practice, right? So listening to my TikToks, great. You're going to get a lot of great information, but then you have to practice, and you have to practice out loud. The other thing I would say is be very careful who you listen to. The reason why I got on TikTok, listen, it was not my demographic, right? I was on TikTok because I was following recruiters and hiring managers because I always want to get their perspective because things change, right? I mean, what they were looking for 10 years ago is not what they're looking for now. What they're looking for 2 years ago is not what they're looking for now. So as an interview coach, I need to keep up with what they're looking for. So I was following a bunch of hiring managers and recruiters, but you know how TikTok works, right? The For You page, they're like, oh, you like that? Maybe you'd like this. And they started giving me interview advice from creators on my For You page. I was not going to get on TikTok. I'm like, what am I going to do? Put on makeup and give and interview tips? Like I'm going to dance and point and no, not for me. But on my For You page, there was a creator who presented themselves as a career coach who was giving their followers their advice about how to answer what is your weakness. And it was dangerous advice. It was the kind of advice that would actually get you disqualified. It was the exact wrong answer. And I looked at the creator's profile and I saw they had 10,000 followers. And I'm like, I take the trust, and I think anyone who gives interview advice needs to take very seriously the trust that person is placing in you to allow you to coach them for what may be the most important competition of their lives with only one winner. So I take that very seriously. And when I saw this person with 10,000 followers cavalierly saying, this is how you answer this very common question, and I knew it was horrible advice, I got mad. And so I picked up my phone and I hit that plus button to record. I had never made a TikTok in my life. And I said, like I was talking to a client, this is how you answer what is your weakness if you ask that in an interview. And I proceeded to tell them, this is the strategy. Here's what the hiring manager is looking for. Here's the right way. Here's the way you can blow it. And I published it and I put my phone down, posted it. Come back a few days later, got a couple of thousand likes. Okay, well, there's another way to answer what is your weakness. Let me do well on that. And I did that. And within 4 months, I had 40,000 followers. It was a total fluke. It was not my intention to be a TikTok creator. And I'm not like other TikTok creators. I don't post 3 times a week. If you go to my TikTok at Your Interview Coach, you'll find it is 90 minutes of content at most. I put something there when I think there's something people who are preparing for an interview need to know. So if you look, there's a lot of testimonials on my TikTok about how I watched all your TikTok videos the night before my interview and I got the job. Thank you. Like that's what it's there for, because not everybody can afford to work with an interview coach. And I know that. And it breaks my heart when people call me and they say, I've got this big interview. I really want to nail it. What do you charge? And I tell them and they're like, oh, and I've done classes, but my TikTok is there for the folks that maybe don't have the resources right now to hire a professional, but they want that level of reputable advice. They can go to my TikTok. And so be careful who you listen to. There are a lot of reputable creators out there that really want to help. JT O'Donnell from Work It Daily is one of them. There's a lot of really good ones, but there are also people that they want the likes, they want the comments, because this is how they get paid. And they're willing to get paid while risking your ability to get paid. So be very careful who you listen to.
I am very proud of you, Lili, for taking action, because we always say somebody needs to respond to this person. And I'm very proud of you for taking action. Can you share with the audience what you're hoping to accomplish in the next little while, where you're stepping out of comfort zone, to give these young people an idea, what does stepping out of my comfort zone look like?
Well, a lot of what I've done was stepping out of my comfort zone. Building a business was stepping out of my comfort zone. Building a website. It's no longer the do-it-yourself Wix website. I've had to upgrade since then. And learning about SEO. And, I actually hired a tutor to teach me how to do my own SEO, because I didn't want to have to keep calling and paying for somebody else to do my search engine optimization. So that's been a big learning curve. All of that was definitely stepping outside of my comfort zone. But when I look to the future, what I would really love more than anything, and it's been my goal for a long time, is to be able to teach these skills and to get at people much earlier in their career, to teach them these skills. Because I can't tell you the amount of clients who come back to me and say, not only did these communication skills help me nail the interview and get the job, but they've been really helpful in my work, in communicating up and managing and interpersonal communications. Really important skills in just about any job where you're working on a team, right? So my dream is to be able to teach these skills at the beginning of someone's career, when they're in college, before they go. I've taught high schoolers, like before they go even for that first summer job interview or that first internship, where it's not so overwhelming, where it's just simple communication skills. What are your 5 messages that you want to make sure they know about you before you leave this interview, right? As simple as that. And if someone learns those skills at the beginning, their whole trajectory changes, right? It opens so many more doors. So that would be my dream. I would love to work with the folks in college career centers. These are the most giving, service-oriented folks that work in these college career centers. They have often thousands of students for each person. They're trying to do it all: resumes and networking and LinkedIn bios and interview and every part of career, including helping them find what direction they want to go do and that kind of career coaching. And they often don't have the resources or the time for the kind of in-depth skills training that interviews really require. I would love to train the folks in college career centers with kind of the latest best practices in interviewing, including how to help their students nail what's coming, which are these asynchronous AI-assessed interviews.
This is a very important mission that you're going to put yourself on. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, I work with young people, and a lot of time, like, why did they not teach us this in school? There's always that message. Why didn't I learn that in school? So appreciate your mission, and I'm right behind you. Anything I can do to support you to make it real, let's do it.
Oh, thank you.
These were all questions I had prepared for you today, Lili. Was there anything else you would like to add? One more message, one more tip for the audience before we wrap up?
I would just say that don't give up. If you're looking for a job right now and you're frustrated, don't give up. It does take an average of 5 to 6 months. If you're doing all the things that you can do, right? Your resume is targeted, you're networking, you're preparing for the interview. Just don't give up. You will get a break. I'm here to support you. You can go to me on TikTok at your interview coach for some free tips. You can find me at my website, impressiveinterviewing.com. My company is Impressive Interviewing. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I welcome all connections.
Thank you so much for your time, Lili. It's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
This is it for Hoda's Career Info, the program where career professionals from across the globe join me to empower you to succeed. Our guest today on Hoda's Career Info was TikToker and founder of Impressive Interviewing, Lili Foggle. You can connect with Lili on LinkedIn. In this episode, Lili shared just about anybody can learn to interview successfully. And my question to you today: how confident are you in your ability to successfully interview? Comment and share your thoughts and experiences. Remember, you can watch Hoda's Career Info on YouTube or listen to the episode on your favorite podcast app. Do let me know if you are interested in an opportunity to talk about your work. You can send me a direct message on my website, rightcareerfit.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date on the latest episode. Please like, subscribe, share, and follow me on social media. And together, let's increase career info. I am your host, Hoda. Until next time, take the time to pause, reflect, and celebrate what you have achieved.